Hello, good morning or good evening, wherever you are. So, today we are going to learn about how to connect our server to our database. So, first thing that we are going to need, let's see our architecture. We need a client, we need a server, and we need a database. So, in our case, um, our client send request to a server, and the server send request to a database, and it's back and forth. So, so first we are going to talk about DBMS, Database Management System, which basically manages the actual database. So how this works is, so we have a database somewhere stored in a machine, local machine, or a cloud machine database, and our database management system performs CRUD operation and network operations on that. So inside database management system, we have something called database engine, which is responsible again for the editing and creating in database and updating in database. So once we have our structure, this is our architecture. So we are going to need three things. So first thing that we do is we create a connection from server to database. We need something called schema and we need something called model. So so these are the things that we are going to do in this tutorial. So first we create a connection between our server and database. Now what schema it is basically a structure of a table in database. So it is where every field of your table is defined. So this is very important to do. Now, another thing that we need is a model. So our model is basically because is basically that something that is a process that converts a table in database to a class so that we can use it in the server. Because normally in our database management system, we can only query database using a database management system. So we need something called mongoose for that process, which is a ODM, or you can hear a term called ORM. So ODM is basically object data modeling, which helps us to communicate uh, and query the database from our JavaScript server. So that is why we need model, and it's very important. So that is provided to us by an external library called Mongoose. So through that, we can talk to our database and we can query our database from server. So now let's create this in our project. So this is what we'll be creating today. We'll be making a connection, we'll be building a schema, and we'll be building a model. And what we are also going to do is we are going to create endpoints and use the data. So let's go out to a root folder and create a new folder where we are going to build our server. Now let's open that. Let's go to that project and let's open it in VS Code. So let's open terminal, and what we are going to do is we are going to create a package.json. So for that we are going to yarn init, and we the name as it is entry point will be server.js, and we are done. So under our package.json, because we are using a model system, we define our type as module and we write our script. We start, and that will be node the server.js. This is where our server will be running, and for dev we use node-mon servers.js. Now this is our complete package.json for now. So we are going to create a file called server.js, which is where we create our API and we listen. So first thing that we are going to need is we are going to need Express for building API. So we are going to import that. We are going to import Express from Express, and we are going to define a port where our server will be running. We are going to now initialize our Express, and we are going to listen the request. So we are basically starting a server here. We give an error, we throw in an error message, and we throw also in a success message. right, server running successfully on our local host with our port name. So we are basically done with the server. So now to check if it's really running, we go to our terminal, we go to the folder and we type yarn and we check. Okay, we can see the message. Our server is running successfully. So now we have successfully created our server. Now one thing that we're going to do is we are going to make our connection to a database. For this, I have used MongoDB. So what we need is we need a base URI from the local engine that we are going to connect to. So, and then we will be doing the connection part now. So what I prefer to do is I prefer to separate the folders so that whenever the project is big, it is easier and not confusing at all. So I create a folder called config, and inside config, because it is a database configuration, I create a file called dbconfig.js. So now what I'm going to do is to create a connection, we need a path URI, and we need our database name, and we need something called Mongoose, which is the ODM, object data modeling, that will help us to make connection between server to database. So we are going to add the package Mongoose, and okay. So now I'm going to import Mongoose. Then we are going to create our variable, store our database name in our variable, which in our case is a grocery. And we are going to create a constant connection URI, which is the local engine path that we copied, and we include our database name. Now we are going to create a simple arrow function so that we can connect our server to database. So connect to MongoDB, which is simply an arrow function. And so we are going to use a try class blocks because it is a database connection and there can be error. So if there is an error, we want to catch it. So to connect our server to database, we just use our mongoose.connect and we give our connection URI. And this is it. We will connect. So first connect. So if it is successfully connected, we give our success message, database connected successfully at connection URI. All right. So now we are going to export this uh, file, this function, and we are going to call it from our server. So export, and then we are going to call it right after we initialized. All right. So we call it and we see if it is really connected or not. So for that, we can check our terminal. Oh, okay, we have an error. All right, this is a classic one. So it turns out because we missed .js while importing. So this is very important to do, else you will get that error. So all right, we have our local host running and we are our database connected to our local engine. So we are done with the connection part. So the next thing that we are going to do is build a schema, which is basically structure of a table, and where we define what kind of data fields that we are going to use. So again, for that, I am going to create a separate folder. Again, it is a very good idea to separate your folders in small projects so that you have that habit. And for that, we have our 5 collection, and we are going to use department in this case. So we are going to create a schema for our department collection or table. So we are going to name it as department schema.js. We go inside schema. So this is where we defined our schema for department. So it's just a simple variable and mongoose dot schema. It will take a JavaScript object. So before that, we need to create a model so that we can use it from our server. So for that, we need to create mongoose model and we give it a name department and we pass our schema. So the department that is here that gets converted into tables in plural form, whatever we write in singular form here. So we have our model, we passed our schema, meaning we successfully converted the schema or table into class so that we can use it from our server. Now we define our schema. So the data field that we have is the department name. The first thing that is department name, and it is a string type. So we are going to write type string, and we are going to make sure that it is entered. So we are going to set required to, and we are going to set a few other properties, which is let's say lowercase. I want everything to come in lowercase, and I want no white spaces. So the next field is manager name. So manager name is the same type string, required true, lowercase true, and trim is true. And the next is manager start date, which is type is date and required is true. And now if you are wondering from where I'm knowing this, you can just go to Mongo's documentation and check it there. It's all there on what kind of type that we can use, string, number, date. It's all there. So you just need to check documentation for that. Okay, so back to our process. We successfully created our schema, and we have successfully uh, converted it into model. We are going to export it so that we can use it later. So now what we are going to do is we are going to uh, in our database engine. So we made our model. So now we are going to query. So from our server. So we have already converted our schema to model. That gives our ability on server to use it as a class and functions to query our database. So we are going to make a department model that will have a list of function which will then query to database with the help of Mongoose. So now this is just a list of queries that we write as functions. So we will just export it because we are going to then later use it in server.js. So export, let's get departments, and it is so we need a constant here. It is a normal arrow function, and then we are going to use our model here, department model dot find. So this is how we query our database using Mongoose. Now you can find a lot of queries here in Mongoose documentation. Again, you have to check Mongoose documentation. It is right here, and we can use a lot. We can use find, we can use delete, and we can update. So it's all written there, right? So after this is done, we have to use call this. So we will use this model to we'll use this model to get data from database, and that database will be using in API endpoint. So using API endpoint, we will call the model, we will get the data from database and send data to whoever is calling that endpoint. So in our case, it will be an API tool today. So this is how the whole process works. So let's do it. So we will be going to our server. First, we'll check if our connection is running successfully, and we will just define a middleware so that we can send our data as a JSON format. So we will be creating an endpoint app.get and API slash v1 slash get departments, which is, so this is the endpoint. We can use any endpoint. So this is a get endpoint for index, means we will be having a list of collections in this one. So it is taking request and response. So what are we going to respond here is response.json. So we are going to call our model there, depart get departments, and we just check that our extensions are correct, so, or else it will give an error. And we'll be calling it because it is an async, this is a network call, so we better make it an async and await. So let's test it out and find if this works or not. Okay, everything seems all right. We will check if our database is running, connection is running. Okay, so now we will call this endpoint using our browser first to check if it's working or not. Localhost slash get departments. Okay, the data is not coming. Something is wrong. Let's find out what's wrong. Now, this is really important as a developer because this is what you'll face. So you will need to debug. So that's why I'm including this process here. Let's find out what's wrong. Okay, so our connection is okay. Okay, our connection is running good. Let's check if our database name is correct. Yes, it is correct. Our model is correct. Departments we are using, we're exporting. So this is good. So export constant get department dot find. I think it seems okay. What might be the error? So let's just console log it once and then check what's wrong. Get departments. Okay. Let's hit the query. Let's hit the API again. It is the same error that we are getting. We are getting an undefined. So we are not getting any data there. Let's check our call again. Find get department server.js. This, oh, okay. Let's try. It's running. It's still getting undefined. So we're still not getting data. Let's check why is this happening. It's still undefined. Okay. Hmm. Okay. So we are not getting our data. We are getting our data from database, but we are not getting our data in the function call. Okay, so there we are not getting our data there. Okay, whoa, we have not returned our data. That's why we are not getting data. Very simple error, but yes, it can happen. Let's try. Okay, let's run it again. Okay, there we go. We are getting the data. All right, this happens. All right, so we call our API, and there we go. We are getting our response in our JSON format. We can check the network cap to see our details, all the connection and headers. We can check response. We are getting our data as an array of objects. All right, there we go. So that's what we wanted to learn in this database. We made a connection. We created a connection. We made a schema. We made model, and then we through using our endpoint, we got our data. And this is so we will create one more. So this is for index, and we will create one more for read request for so, meaning we will be using individual data this time, single data. Const get department for this, and the arrow function we need an ID so that we can get that from ID. So we will be using that specific ID. So return, very important, department model dot find an ID. Okay, so we'll be creating an endpoint for that. Get so app dot get API v1 slash get department. It is an async process, and then we are going to await, and this is how we will be getting our ID. Request params, that's where we send to model, which will then talk with database and then send us a request back. Okay, so this should work. Let's try it out. Okay, we go and we want to copy this ID. And after doing that, get department, we copy the ID, we enter. Okay, we have an error. Wow, awesome. I like it. Let's check the error. Filter, fine. Okay, so there's something called, I need to show you in Mongo's documentation. If you can go to model, there's something called find by ID whenever you want to you find by ID. So we are going to need that find by ID. We provide the ID from parameter and then we check it out. Voila, it works. Okay, so we have got the individual record 2, and now we'll be using it, we'll be trying it in Postman. It is basically an API documentation tool. So we are going to make a folder. We are going to name it department. And then we'll get request. We just make a get departments and we use our URL, URI for that. And then we send. Now we get a response from Postman. And then we are also going to do it for the individual one. So for that, we are going to give it an ID. So we are just going to copy that and then send. If we do that, we will get a single object with an ID. So this is the whole process that we do. We call an API, we get the data from database, we get a response data back, and we send it back to whatever is calling the API. So this is the whole process. If you have any question regarding to this, please feel free to comment.